Hey everyone, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you guys for being such an amazing community so far and for all of your support. You guys have been amazing and it's been so much fun to create content for the One Piece TCG. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on the notification bell. My goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of July. If we hit that goal, I'll be doing an awesome giveaway with custom One Piece cards that you won't want to miss. And so let's make it happen together, and thanks again for being awesome. Hey everyone, adakai TCG here, and I'm coming at you guys with another video. Today I'm going to be going over the Bonney vs. Lucci matchup, and then I'm going to be giving you guys, similar to the last video, 5 tips to help you conquer the Rob Lucci matchup. This matchup is weird. It can go either way, really. You know, if the Lucci high roll sees his stage, sees his removal, sees the pieces he needs, it can be a surprisingly one-sided game for the Lucci, but Bonney definitely has the tools to beat this matchup. I do think in my testing, it's a kind of 50-50, where it might even be slightly favored to Bonney if she sees 1 or 2 key pieces in the match. And so yeah, just take that with what you will. Again, these tips are just coming from my own experience and my playthroughs. I've done a ton of testing with Bonney, had many games against the meta leaders, and yeah, these are just kind of some tips that I've come up with to help you guys with this matchup. And again, some of these tips may be relevant even if you don't play Bonney, but in this matchup and these tips particularly, I do think it is a little bit more geared towards Bonney players, because I'll be talking about certain cards that are going to be helping with the matchup. And so, but maybe the core concept would still be similar if you're playing a different deck. But yeah, let's get right into it. All right, so similarly to last time, we're going to be going over the important cards first. So one of the most important cards, if not the most important card, will be your 6-cost, 7k power Basil Hawkins. For those of you who don't know, this leader, if your leader is a Supernovas type character, which Bonney is, it gains blocker, which is great, but we love it because of the secondary effect. Once per turn, if this character would be removed from the field by your opponent's effect, you may rest one of your opponent's characters instead. And so this card is super sticky. This means that in any black matchup, if they play any on-play KO abilities, this Basil will stick. They either have to KO it twice, or they have to KO it with all the characters rested, maybe utilizing an event or the 3-cost Brook. And so, really strong effects. It's very sticky, and he is a 7k power, meaning that he's going to be swinging at the leader for a high value, and hopefully he is going to be playing an integral role in closing out the game and giving you advantage in the match. And so, very important card. We'll talk about him more later. But another 2 cards you want to look out for are the 8-drop Kid paired with the Rosinante. We're going to talk about this in a later part of the tip, but again, when these two are paired together, that's when they're the strongest against Lucci. And you have the 10-drop Don Quixote do Flamingo. He will give us and buy us another turn most of the time. And he's another sticky body because he's a 10-cost, meaning he's going to be a little bit harder for the Lucci to remove. And then lastly, it's a 7-cost Hody Jones. Just being able to rest 2 cards is going to be really key into the black matchup, as they do like to block her up towards the end of the game, hoping that you can't get through that wall. And so him being able to rest both of them and rush is just going to be key. But again, we'll talk about that more in a later tip. Some notable mentions. I don't have a slide or the picture there, but there are some people out there running the 5-drop Luffy tech and Rosinante as well. What that is the 8-cost Rosinante will play out the 5-cost Luffy, who the Luffy reads any of your 3-cost characters, can't be KO'd by effects. I was running it for a little bit, but it did feel a little clunky to set up and a little too hard to consistently set up, even with the searches you have in the deck. And so I opted to cut it for a more consistent deck, but there is that tech that exists out there. If you are a Bonney player and you just happen to be in a meta where you're facing many Luccis, it may be something you want to consider. But yeah, let's get right into the tips. Alright, so tip number 1, you want to go for life most of the time. And so the reason I say this is because the Lucci deck is actually quite limited in the number of 2k counters that they run. And most of the time, they are using some of those 2ks for utility. Meaning they're going to be dropping their Surus to cost reduce, the Khalifas to cycle and cost reduce. And so I would say look through their trash and keep an eye out on how many 2ks they've been using. And that should help you dictate how you want to swing into the Lucci player, as well as give you an idea of how many 2k counters they should have left. And so, yeah, most of the time you want to just go for their life, because even when you go for their board, they're just going to be recycling those cards with their Moria, with their Rebecca. And so the reason why Bonnie's able to do this, though, is because her kit is naturally very defensive. We are taking 1 less swing per turn if we leave 1 up for the Bonney effect. And so being a 5-life leader, on top of that, we oftentimes will be at a healthier life and a more manageable even hand size from countering out of the less attacks. And so definitely very good. But one exception that I do have is 3-cost Brook. I always try to get rid of that nerd. Him being able to KO on attack instead of an on-play effect, which he does have that as well, does end up threatening your Basil Hawkins. And so he is one that I always do try to get rid of if he's on the board. And so, yeah, let's get into tip number 2. The next tip that I'll have is swing with your blockers. I've seen this happen somewhat frequently, but if you're lucky to keep an Arouge on the board, just swing with it. It's not going to survive another turn, so you might as well get the extra value of being able to remove at least a counter from their hands, or them even taking a life, right? And so swing with your Arouges, swing with your Basil Hawkins. The Basil Hawkins, as long as you can reasonably defend it, I would say swing with it, because it's going to be harder for them to swing into it. It's a 7k power, and so the only exception to that rule is Rosinante. Do not swing with that blocker. You need him active. You need to be able to have him just tank the on-play KOs for your 8-drop kid. Alright, so tip number 3 for Bonney players specifically, Basil Hawkins. I don't know how to say him. I say it both ways, but mulligan for this card. This card wins you the match in many ways. So the more Basil Hawkins you see, the easier the matchup becomes. So play out the Hawkins, use Bonney Search to pick up the Hawkins most of the time. You know, if you're completely bricked up and you need some counters, maybe you take a counter or two, but most of the time you're drawing the Hawkins, right? And then the only thing you have to be aware of is, again, the 3-cost Brook, but that's pretty easy to play around later on, because oftentimes they need to swing with like their leader to get the cost reduction there, and you just rest that Brook. But yeah, and also be aware of Finger Pistol. I'm seeing more and more Lucci's tech this in specifically for Hawkins. Just be aware that it exists, and your Hawkins can die to that event. And so, yeah, but Basil Hawkins, really good card, really key for the matchup. Tip number 4 is learning to rest the right character. So this is something that you're going to be developing over just many matches against Lucci. A blanket rule could be that you're going to rest the next highest character, next highest power character. But in the Lucci matchup, actually, there are some key other targets, right? And so if they end up swinging with something like a Moria first, it may be worthwhile, if you're okay on life and if you're okay on your counters, to actually rest the leader or the 3-cost Brook instead, right? And so the Lucci deck often has to consider the cost reduction of the leader and maybe a 3-cost Brook to really hit the exact values that they want to maximize their on-play KOs. So by resting these targets, you actually make it a little bit harder, the math a bit harder for the Lucci player who may have had the perfect way to get rid of part of your board, but because of this, they are having to take inefficient plays. And so, yeah, this is something that you're going to be understanding as you play more and more of these matches. But just things like, yeah, count how many Tempest Kicks they used. Some Lucci's run Ice Age, see how many they used. You know, if they don't have stage, if they do, you know, you have to take those into account when you're choosing who you're going to rest with the Bonney effect. But yeah, so just know that there are other key targets. The leader and the 3-cost Brook can definitely matter. There was a game I almost lost, actually, because I greedily rested his Moria instead of his 3-cost Brook. And that 3-cost Brook gave him the one reduction of cost he needed to actually take out my 9-cost Zoro. He wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise with the Dawn that he had. And so, yeah, it bit me in the butt. But yeah, so just know, yeah, there are other targets for this. And tip number 5, really start understanding your late game options. This is going to actually help you in your searches and knowing what you're kind of looking for to help you close out the game. And so 8-cost Kid, he is goated if you play with the Rosinante blocker. You always want to pair these two together, as I kind of mentioned in the important cards. Yeah, just having the 8-cost Kid being played out, and then having Rosinante covering him with the KO ability, or even just him if they swing big into the 8-cost Kid as well. Really, really awesome to negate one effect on the 8-cost Kid. And so Lucci's oftentimes not KOing twice per turn. They're only usually KOing one occurrence. And so they're almost forced to use it on the Rosinante blocker, and then forced to use the remainder of what they can do to remove the 8-drop Kid, which hopefully this time you have enough counters just to counter out of it. And then you are chilling now with an 8-cost Kid on board, at least for another turn, and he's going to be swinging right back into the Lucci leader, who's going to be probably low on counters at this point. And so, yeah, very strong combo if you can play it together. If you don't have the Rosinante blocker, I would argue sometimes it's probably not the best play, unless there's no other play you can do. But 8-cost, Lucci can definitely get rid of that pretty easily, especially if he has a stage. And so, yeah, those two paired together are great. The 10-cost drop, the 10-drop Doflamingo, he is a fantastic card at extending the game another turn. So what he does is he can, oftentimes the Lucci player is going to be swinging with what they have on board, and then playing out some variation of cards, rested and active, right? And so most of the time they will be playing out something like a Lucci rested if they do the full Moria, Rebecca, Spandine combo. You just go ahead and rest their Lucci leader, their Lucci character, and whatever else swinging at you during that turn. And oftentimes with that paired with, if you are lucky enough to have an Arouge on the board, you still get the Bonney ability. But even then, I think just sometimes having the 10-drop Doflamingo locking 3 targets can oftentimes extend the game one more turn and allow you to still swing with what you have on board, right? To chip some more cards out of their hands or get rid of some of the blockers that they have up. And so, yeah, he's really good at just drawing it out. Just that one more turn maybe that you need, one more body that you maybe need to close it out with this next card, which is the 7-cost Toady Jones. This card is fantastic at closing out the Lucci game. I would say if games I didn't see this card, I'm at like 35 to 65, you know? But the games I do see this card, you know, it's more 50-50, and I'm able to rest 2 of their blockers, which they love to blocker up at the end of the game, because the Lucci often doesn't have too many counters. And so, yeah, being able to play out the Toady Jones, rest the 2 blockers, and swing with the rest of your board is just great. And so definitely understand what your late game looks like, because you know Bonney gets to drop one of these things a turn. So depending on what you need and depending on the pairings that you have, you're oftentimes going to be making a decision of what to drop. And so these are kind of just little tidbits from each of the boss monsters. I guess there is an honorary mention to the 9-cost Zoro. If that sticks, you are golden. You're just next turn swinging with that and getting rid of either their whole hand or their whole life. And so, but be warned that 9-drop Zoro hardly ever sticks. The more Lucci player will do everything in his power to get rid of it. And so, if you notice that they have an incredibly low hand size, maybe and you have a really healthy life, it may be worthwhile to try to get that Zoro to stick. But again, in my matchup experiences, these 3 boss monsters have helped me a lot more in the matchups. And yet again, I have one more bonus tip for my lovely supporters. I know I just tricked you guys saying I only have 5 tips, but here is an extra one because I just appreciate you guys so much. And this bonus tip is Lucci KOs your characters, not your heart. So in any game, Lucci can high roll and see all the right pieces and completely empty your board, but he can never truly empty your heart unless you let him. So stay calm, always play it out, and just keep on grinding, fam, because for every high rolling Lucci there is, you will face a low rolling Lucci and you will stomp on them. And so that's my advice to you guys. Always play it out. And even with that high rolling Luffy, I've played against the high rolling Luffy before, and I've still been able to close out the game against him with the right combination of the 10-drop Dofi and my Hody Jones. And so don't give up, guys. You may not have a board, you may not have life, but the game's not over till the game is over, right? And so stay calm, always play it out, and you guys got this. And so once again, thank you so much for watching. If you guys like this sort of content, please subscribe. One of the things that I've seen in my analytics is only actually 14% of my viewers are subscribers to me. And so that's like an 86% that's just watching, enjoying the content, but just haven't been subscribing. So if you do like this content, please do subscribe. I'm trying to hit 1K followers, as mentioned before. I will be doing a giveaway. And so, yeah, again, I appreciate you guys. Much love, and adakai out.